So Bruno, I'm going to introduce you, let you get started. I might divert my attention a little bit and try and work on that. But Bruno, we're excited to have you. I mean, radon is an issue in here, and not a lot of people have a lot of knowledge about radon. You've done a class for us before, which was super, super awesome. And I know my team sure appreciates you and your team. You guys are awesome. Another thing that I don't think a lot of agents realize is that you do these tests to at least find out if there's radon for free. So it's just part of our process. We go under contract. The first thing we're doing is we're ordering a home inspection. We're ordering our radon to be dropped off. And I really appreciate the way you work with us too on our due diligence deadlines, right? You know, because we want to know before, and if sometimes to be competitive in this market, we're tight on our deadlines, and you're probably not happy all the time when we're saying, I got to have this by Thursday. But I love the way you accommodate us and do your best to make that happen.
We do our best. In fact, I just barely added the 5th driver. So we've got 5 drivers zooming around all over, you know, just doing real estate transactions. So yeah,
you guys are busy.
You guys have been great to work with. And the last CE class that we did in person, it went really well, and looking forward to this. And you know what? Maybe we'll do a 3rd CE class with the stragglers. So
yeah, perfect. Yeah, we might need to send something out to those and find out who missed it that really wanted to be here and do something else. We do have 17 of us on. I think that text message we sent out, Eric, helped some of them jump on. I'll continue to work with that. But Bruno, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can kind of explain a little bit more about your company and who you are, and share your screen and do your deal. And again, we appreciate you. And Bruno, like I said, is the owner of Utah Radon Services. It's our favorite radon company here locally, and they're just amazing. So Bruno, take it away. It's you.
Thank you, Jeff. You can see my full screen, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, fantastic. So first of all, this is not an advertorial for Utah Radon Services. This is a core CE class. And the very last screen, I will talk a little bit about us after we're done with it. So that way you just know for your clients. But yeah, we're Utah Radon Services. We are the largest radon company in Utah. In fact, if you put all the other radon companies combined, we do more mitigations than everybody else combined. And part of that is just, you know, our testing programs, but also, you know, we really do want to do your customers well. And we'll get into that later. So this is a 1-hour core. We're starting at 12:15. We will end at 1:15. I respect your time. This is only an hour. This is really important. So this red sign-in sheet right here, this link, you need to take a screenshot or take your camera, take a photo of this. In order to get credit for this, you need to go to this Google Sheet and you need to fill out your information. I just barely finished doing another CE class, so there's going to be other names on there that you probably won't recognize. And so we're just sharing all this for all CE classes I do in a single day. So tinyurl.com/urs-CE. I've got this link at the very last slide as well, so that way if you don't get this, we can get it again. But let's jump right in. So radon, wow, not very exciting. I would not have thought, before I started this company, if you would have asked me in a real estate transaction, hey, you know, do you want to get a radon test for the house? I'd say, I never hear about radon. It can't be all that important. So yeah, don't worry about it. So boy, I've learned a lot since, and looking forward to sharing with you guys. Okay, objectives of the next hour. What are we talking about? First of all, let's find out what even is radon. You know, most people don't know. You walk down the street in Utah and you ask 10 people, maybe 2, 3 might even tell you what it is. The other ones are like, I don't know, never heard of it. So what's radon? Radon in Utah. We care about Utah, not Pennsylvania. Testing in homes. So in order to find out if you have radon, you have to test. We're going to talk about that. Mitigation of radon. So that's actually means, you know, fixing of the homes. And radon in real estate transactions. Why does this involve you? Why should you care? And we've got some tips of the right way of handling radon, both testing and mitigation in your own transactions. And this is whether you're the buyer's agent or the listing agent. And then we have a final Q&A. And what's kind of fun about this presentation is we also then jump into some live maps of radon tests that we've done. And I share with you different areas so you can really see, you know, what is the actual radon situation in Utah. So let's jump into this. Radon. When you think of radon, oh, by the way, one last quick thing. So you guys should probably have all muted yourselves. If you have a question during it, or if you don't understand something, or if you disagree, unmute yourself and jump on in. Because I mean, let's address it right there on that slide. Really, very happy to do participation. All right, sources of radiation exposure. So we're now talking about radiation. Why? Because radon is radioactive. What we're talking about is a radioactive gas. I'm going to be showing you a bunch of different statistics, numbers, slides. All of them are coming from a national or world organization. So this one, for example, comes from Duke University. A lot of the stats I'm going to be sharing come from the EPA or the World Health Organization. So in this one, what they're saying is on a national level, the sources of radiation exposure that you receive, here are different breakdowns of it. And on a national level, they say that radon is over 50% of all the radiation dosage you're going to get. And Utah is 5 times worse in radon than the national average. So of all the radiation that you're exposed to, over 75% of it comes from radon in Utah. Pretty crazy. So way more than medical or x-rays or going through the x-ray at the airport. So what really is radon? How do we get it? What's the issue? So let's start with this. So, Jeff, he comes under contract in Mill Creek, and it's an 800 square foot home, single car garage. What do you think, Jeff? Maybe about 2.5 million, 800 square feet. It's on a quarter acre. And you think it's a screaming deal. And you're the buyer's agent, you order the radon test, it comes back high radon, and your customer says, how in the world does this have radon? What even is it? So the way you can explain it is radon comes from uranium underneath the house, in the soil beneath the house. So that uranium, they make bombs out of it, things like that. In and of itself, it actually doesn't cause a problem. But as the uranium breaks down, that's the problem it causes. It turns into, as something radioactive breaks down, it turns into actually other elements, which is crazy. So uranium turns into radium, that then turns into radon. And here's the part that's then the concern. So uranium just kind of sticks there. It doesn't really move or anything. But once it turns into radon, radon is called a noble gas. It doesn't stick to anything, not even itself. So you now have individual atoms that can float through the soil very easily, and they then are coming up into our houses, and they're also going, it's just diffusing out in the outside air. So if you were to test for radon on the outside, you would see a really minute amount of radon just even outside. But in our houses, they're enclosed, they kind of capture it, and what we get is then higher concentrations. So radon is naturally occurring. That's why you're not seeing at 11 o'clock at night next to the mesothelioma ads and the lawyer saying, hey, let's do a class action lawsuit. You can't sue anybody for there being uranium underneath your house. So that's why you don't hear about it, is because nobody is financially motivated to sue anybody. There's nobody that you can really sue. Naturally occurring. It's not sticky. It floats through the air very easily once it's released, and it can't be seen or smelled. So like, for example, when you were talking about that crawl space that you opened up and it was just rancid, that would have been a lot of other nasty stuff, but it would not have been radon. You cannot smell it. You can't detect it unless you actually do a radon test. So, and what we have is it's entering up from homes and buildings from the soil beneath. And that's really key. It's not coming from the air. It's not coming from fallout of nuclear bombs that they tested in Nevada forever ago. It's in the soil beneath, and it's just the natural uranium. So that's kind of where it comes from. Now let's talk about why should we even care about it? And so the health effects of radon. And so all this information, these stats are going to be coming from the EPA. If you ever want to do any more research on it, on the lower left-hand screen, it says epa.com/radon. So you can, you'd have to geek out pretty hard to spend any time, but.
Hey, Bruno.
Yeah.
Before you move on into this next section, you were just talking about where radon comes from, right?
Yes.
I just wanted to bring up one topic of discussion. So when we test the lowest level of the house, right? Because it comes up from the ground.
Potentially livable level. So it needs to be potentially livable. So like you would never test a crawl space, for example, because you don't live in the crawl space. But an
Right.
unfinished basement, yes, you would still test there. Yes.
Yeah, potentially. So the comment I wanted to make was I still test above grade condos, townhomes that have their lowest living level is above grade. A lot of agents think if it doesn't have a basement, they don't test. So when I had 2 townhomes in the same subdivision that I sold to different buyers, test high for radon, both of those agents said, I've never even tested a house that doesn't have a basement. I never would have even thought to do that. So you may have, we're going to get into that later, but I wanted to bring that up while you're talking about where it comes from. It comes from the ground, and we test that lowest potential living level, even if it's above ground.
Fantastic, Jeff. I've got a whole section on this of myths of what type of homes. So fantastic. Yeah. No, great, great point. So why do we even care about radon? Is because it does cause negative health effects. So jumping in, remember we said it's radioactive, and radioactivity can damage DNA. So for example, it depends on the source of the radiation, but skin cancer. What that's doing is the sun is affecting the DNA in our skin, and it can then break down and then cause mutations. Well, radon, we breathe in, we now have radon in our lungs. When the radon decays, it's shooting off these tiny little microscopic missiles called alpha particles. And if it hits the DNA in our lung just perfect, not to destroy it, but to just damage it, it then can mutate and then turn into lung cancer. So what we're talking about here is lung cancer. And the EPA states that 14% of all lung cancers are attributable to indoor radon. So there are a lot of cancers out there. Not that there's a popular cancer or something, but you don't hear as much about lung cancer as you do some of the others. You've got the pink ribbons. So for example, breast cancer, we hear a lot about colon cancer, skin cancer. Here's the crazy thing. Of all the different cancers, what is the biggest killer among all of them? And that is lung cancer. And to the point where the next 6 cancers down the row, if you add all of them up combined, they are still less than lung cancer deaths. So lung cancer kills well over 150,000 Americans per year, and radon is the second reason. So obviously, what would be the first reason for lung cancer? Of course, it's going to be smoking. And so you've got smoking, then you've got radon, and there really isn't anything else that can cause the lung cancers that you'd see. Mesothelioma, that's coming from asbestos. That's a different type of a cancer of the lung. That kills, to put into a perspective, about 15 to 17,000 Americans per year. Radon is estimated by the EPA to kill over 21,000 people. So it kills more people than asbestos. If you were to walk down the road and say, hey, is asbestos bad? Pretty much everybody's going to say yes. Again, the lawyers did their job to train everybody, because they could sue somebody. If you were to ask people, hey, what's worse, asbestos or radon? Most people would say asbestos. They don't know radon is a class A carcinogen and is a bigger killer than that. So as you're explaining to your clients, and I'm not expecting you to explain all this, but if a client says, why should I care about radon? Here's a little sound bit that you could use, and that would be, radon kills more Utahns than drunk drivers. So Utah, if you look at it in terms of all the different states of who smokes, we're number 50. So congratulations to us. We smoke less than anybody else in the country, but Utah actually has high rates of lung cancer. We do a lot of work with Huntsman Cancer, and as we've been talking to them, they said, well, we don't smoke very much, but because our radon is so high, we have high levels of lung cancers, and it's attributable to the radon, unfortunately. So we really do need to get the word out. Okay, so as we're talking about the health effects, you need to be able to explain to your clients, I mean, what is this actual risk? Because I mean, when you start using numbers, numbers aren't scary. Is the number 4 scary? Number 7, number 3? I mean, you don't know. There are certain things when you do a blood test, if it comes back at 4.1, you're healthy. If it comes back at 4.9, you're dead. And so it's like numbers don't mean anything unless you can actually tie it to something so you can have a better idea of what it really means. So this is an important number when it comes to radon. 4 picocuries, that's the measurement, is the equivalent risk of 200 chest x-rays of radiation per year. So if you live in a home with 4 picocuries, you're receiving the same amount of dosage as if you were getting a chest x-ray, every day and a half. It's also the same risk as if you were smoking 8 cigarettes per day. So that helps to, your customers to better understand, okay, this much radiation has about the same risk as 8 cigarettes. Now, if it's a 10 picocurie radon home, that's the equivalent per the EPA of smoking a pack of cigarettes per day in terms of risk. So, pretty concerning. I think a lot of people, they would not feel comfortable if they were smoking a pack of cigarettes per day without even their knowledge. All right, before we get into this, does anybody have any general health questions or concerns of what's radon? So if somebody asks you, why should I care about radon? The answer is because of lung cancer. And you now have a better idea, kills more Utahns than drunk drivers. Now, if other people say, well, what about any other effects? Radon has been shown to affect and cause Parkinson's, leukemia, and brain cancer. But those are newer studies, and they're continuing to do more peer review studies on those. But the definitive and what we just really focus on is the lung cancer.
I'm digressing, but I do have a question.
You bet.
What have you gathered as far as percentage of homes having radon issues?
Fantastic. We're going to get into that coming up. So great question. Fantastic. And, let me just jump there. 1 in 3 homes in Utah. So 33%. So a lot. Radon is much more concerning than people know. All right, let's jump into this. And this was kind of talking about what Jeff was. This is one of my favorite sections, and this is what homes have high radon. So let's start with, and I've heard from agents every single one of these where they've gotten it wrong. I've heard done a ton of agents, this is a brand new house. Why should I worry about it? The foundation's not cracked, it's got brand new concrete. Why should I even care? It's airtight. Well, what matters, if you look at the bottom of the screen, is there uranium underneath the house or not? So all of the different soil around has some amounts of uranium in it. It takes just a little bit more than, I guess you would say, normal for there to be a huge spike in the radon levels of a home. So if a brand new home is built on soil that has uranium in it, it can have high radon. Just as easy as if it is an old home. I've heard people say, well, wait a second, it's got old windows, it's leaky, it's not going to hold in the radon very well. Well, it's leaky, so you've got probably more cracks in the foundation. It's easier to come up. And as it's leaking, it's actually sucking on the soil more. So old homes can have just as high radon as new homes. So do not make a determination of if it should be tested or not based on that. Just as easy on either one of those. Let's go to the next one. Crawl spaces. It doesn't even have a basement. Well, if you look, we were talking about crawl spaces again. I mean, actually, that's a really nice crawl space, by the way. I wish we saw all of them like that. You've got dirt, air, floor joists, and plywood, carpet, and then it's in your home. If radon can permeate up through 4 inches of concrete in the basement, it can easily go up through your carpet and the floorboards above a crawl space. So crawl space homes we have seen have high radon. So just as likely as a home with a basement. All right, here's a big one, slab on grade. So this is what Jeff was talking about. Slab on grade homes. Deseret News did a big expose on radon back in February of this year. And the reporter, she was, one of the features that she did was a gentleman who 10 years ago, he purchased a home in Olympus Cove, Olympus Hills, Olympus Cove area, and he bought a slab on grade home. His realtor advised him that because it did not have a basement, he did not need to test. 6 years later, he has lung cancer and is dying, and they tested the home and it had high radon. So because of, unfortunately, the wrong, poor advice of his agent, he now is suffering from a terminal disease, unfortunately. So I've had a lot, I mean, just even Jeff, he was saying, agents are saying, oh, don't worry about it, doesn't have a basement, slab on grade. Completely wrong. So we test slab on grades all the time, and they have just as high a radon as homes with basements or as crawl spaces. So if there's anything else that you don't get, if there's one thing you're going to take away from this, hopefully it's understanding that any type of home can have high radon. So let's get to the next one. Agents all the time, I'm hearing, it's got a walkout basement. And I'm saying, so does it have a floor? What's underneath the floor? Dirt? If the dirt has uranium in it, it's going to be just as high as if, I mean, I don't know why a little, sliding door would make any kind of a difference in the radon levels or not. The radon's not coming through the walls, it's coming up through the floor of the house. So walkout basement does not have anything to do with the radon levels. Okay, here's the example that Jeff gave. We are out working in, especially daybreak on pretty much a daily basis, even multiple homes a day in daybreak. And these are townhomes, apartments, little tiny footprint. And you wouldn't think that, there'd be a problem. Well, that little tiny footprint out there, it's really high concentrations of uranium. And so we're seeing many of these daybreak homes that are in the 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s, even 60s picocuries. So again, 60, that's the equivalent of smoking 6 packs of cigarettes a day. They just have a little entryway. They have then the stairs going up to the main living area. But many of these will have an office or a bedroom on that first level. And then in the back, it's oftentimes a garage. Just this little tiny footprint, we're seeing really high radon. So yep, these things can easily have it. Slab on grade, basement, crawl space, they all have it. So here's the good news. There are a couple of types of homes that don't likely have radon. Can you guys think of anything? Any ideas? How about, I know you're all on mute. How about houseboats? Don't have to test. Kind of a bad joke. This one's even worse. Wait till this. How about tree houses? Your client buys a tree house, they don't need to test. All joking aside, mobile homes, if they don't have a slab and a foundation and complete coverings, you're not going to have to worry about mobile homes because they have airflow underneath them. Here's an interesting one, high-rise apartments, downtown Salt Lake City. If they are in the penthouse up on the top, you're fine, you're good to go. The EPA says the first 2 levels, if it is, your client and livable space, that should be tested. Anything above, it's not going to likely have an issue. All right, before I jump to the next section, this is super important. Anybody saying, BS, Bruno, I don't believe it, this or that, or concerns over what type of a house or anything like that, it's really important that you understand this section. Okay, let's jump on to the next one. And that is the areas of radon. So this is obviously a map of the US. The red is zone 1, the highest possibility of high radon. Zone 2, middle, and that's the orange, and then the yellow, of course, is zone 3. It can still have high radon, but just less likely. So if you look at this, you're gonna obviously see a higher concentration, the northern half of the United States. And if you think about it, got any ideas why? Because I mean, obviously it's got higher uranium there, but any ideas why? And if you think back to 11,000+ years ago, what was the deal? Glaciers, the ice age, had come down and they had actually scraped off the topsoil and glaciers ended at about halfway in the US. And so that's why we actually have higher radon here. Now, I've heard many agents say, well, radon's because of the mountains. Well, take a good look at Nebraska, Illinois, Iowa. There's not mountains there. It is flat, and they have high radon. And again, the reason why is just in the soil there, there's higher uranium. So it is not because of granite, and now granite may have uranium in it, but it's because of just uranium in whatever, soil, rocks, clay, sand, that kind of thing. All right, this is our more interactive portion. So here's a Utah radon map. This is from the Utah Geological Survey. And this is where they're saying, based on known deposits of uranium and higher uranium, this is what we would see likely is going to be where the higher radon is. It's kind of accurate, but wait till you see the real data. So if you look at it, where would be the highest radon in the state? And the answer is actually going to be down in Beaver. So Beaver, we are seeing some homes that are testing in the hundreds of picocuries. There was a one home that tested over 300 picocuries. That'd be like, what, 30 packs of cigarettes a day? So if you're going to move down to Beaver, make sure it has a radon system. Okay, let me do this. I am going to jump. Let's see. I'm going to jump over to this. So if somebody could just quickly jump off of mute, and hopefully what you're seeing is a map with a whole bunch of different colored dots. Is that what you guys are seeing?
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. So our company, we do somewhere around 8,000 to 10,000 radon tests a year. And I took some of the tests and put it on this Google map. And we probably have another 15,000 that I need to add, but I haven't done this since 2018. But what this is an actual radon test that we've done. And on the left-hand side, you have then a key. So if it's blue, it would have been 3.9 picocuries or less. And the 4 is an important number. So that's kind of the action level where things really get serious, 4 or above. So blue is 3.9. Any other color is going to be just more and more severity of radon. So the darker you get, the higher the radon. So it's like that super, super dark one, it's going to be radon that's above 30. So a key to this is sometimes we get agents that a test will come back at 9.7 and they say, no way, it's impossible for it to be that high. And I just think, well, you haven't really done that many radon tests. Let's look. This is Daybreak. So let me click on this one here. 38.9. Let's click on another one. 41. 31. 35.7. So I'm clicking on all the really dark ones. You can now tell people I've seen actual radon data where it's in the 30s and 40s out in Daybreak. So just because a radon test comes back, let's say 12, yes, very, very possible for it to be like that. Let me now kind of zoom out and kind of show you. First of all, take a look. We do a lot of radon tests. I'm going to show you the sandy area. So you're seeing there's lots of blues, but you're seeing that also there's some concentrations where there's not as many blues. So looking at this neighborhood, these guys pretty much, there's some high radon here, but let's keep zooming in. Okay, so this guy, he tested at 1.9. 2 houses away, it's 5.7. Let's look at this. Are these neighbors? Yeah, same cul-de-sac. This one tested at 1.5. Across the cul-de-sac, they tested at 11. So as I was saying, it takes just a minute amount of additional uranium to really cause a problem. Your next door neighbor could be high and you could be low. So this would be the base of Little Cottonwood Canyon. And you're seeing, here, I'm going to use my mouse, all of this area, they're testing pretty high. But you go just a little bit more over, and most of the people then are testing low. You go a little bit north, now they're high again. Let's go up to the base of Big Cottonwood Canyon. And actually, there's a lot of low tests there. Yes, there's some high, but there's a lot of low. So just saying it's up against the bench or it's at the base of a canyon means nothing. So at the base of the canyon, you got a whole bunch of blues, but then you go down just a little bit, and Willow Creek Country Club, you've got a whole bunch of homes that are high. 29.1. That's almost 3 packs of cigarettes a day. 18.9. Let's see, 13. So lots. Let me just zoom out and show you a couple more quick things. So Liberty Park area, really hot with real estate transactions. So Liberty Park is this right here, this green area. Pretty much a 10 block to the south and to the east, almost everything's coming back high. Yet you go then to the north of Liberty Park and you're seeing a lot of low, or you go to the east a little bit more and you're seeing a lot more that are low. So that's kind of something interesting. If you go to, remember I was talking about Daybreak. So here's Daybreak, you can see the lakes. So and I wish I had new data because we now have a ton more testing to the west and to the southwest. Really high radon there, but you go east of the lakes, and if you look at it, you're actually seeing, yeah, there are some high homes, but there's a lot more where it's not necessarily high. So it's just, it just shows you Harriman. Let me show you this neighborhood in Harriman. It's crazy. So it seems like everybody got on Facebook and they decided all to test. And if you look at this, you can see, there are some high, there's some low, but I mean, take a look at this. So here is somebody, they're at 2.2, their next door neighbor is at 8, and 2 houses down is 24. If any of you guys are doing transactions in Utah Valley, just FYI, I mean, so this area right here, this is Alpine, Highland, Lehigh area, a lot of high radon. Alpine is really high. We're seeing a lot of homes that are well over 10 there. You go down to Pleasant Grove, to Linden, American Fork area, there's a lot of high radon there. Also just north of Utah Lake, we're seeing high radon. This little neighborhood right here, it's on the northwest end of Utah Lake. It's a retirement community. This is where we've actually done some of our highest radon tests here in Utah. So this one was 36. Look at this. This one came in at 142. This one came in at 89. So this is actually an old folks community. They've got a hot spring that makes their pool nice and warm. It's also bringing up dissolved uranium, and it's really high radon. To show you that there are some places that are low, check this out. West of Hill Air Force Base, that's a lot of low tests, which is fantastic. So that area, not as much. However, if you were asking me, hey Bruno, I'm moving west to Hill Air Force Base, should I test? I would say, yes, I am willing to pay for my person to go out and test, even though it's really likely it's gonna be low because of this example here. So within probably 2 miles of this person right here, there was not another high test except for that one yellow one, 22.6. So I am so glad that we were able to identify that one problem house, because that might have saved a life, because they then fixed it. Does anybody have like a place, an area that they want to look at? So jump off of mute, and I'm happy to look. This is the Park City area. About 50% are coming back high. Heber, about 90% come back high, and there are a lot of dark colors. So Heber, Midway, definitely want to test there. Anybody want to unmute? Anything that you want to see, or should we just keep going?
How about Tooele? I had a home like 4 or 5 years ago, had it built, and it had high radon testing.
Great question. Tooele's funky. Tooele, there's a lot of low, but you're also seeing there are a few, really high. So, especially in the southeast end of things, I mean, we're seeing, 19.7, 19, but, there's a good number of low ones. But here's the point, Erda and north this is, I always forget, it's Stansbury Park. Look at this neighborhood. So almost every single house on the street, except for these two, are pretty darn high. So Stansbury Park. Now, if any of you do transactions in Grantsville is very high. So what I would say is Grantsville, very high. Stansbury Park, pretty high. Tooele, about the standard 1/3. So great question.
So Bruno, what is your, for your company, your geographical area that you guys cover and test?
We cover all of Utah. So I currently have 6 vans running. We're fixing 12 to 14 homes a day, and we're all the way from Logan to St. George. So we'll do. Now in testing, I'll talk about us after this is over. We can only do free testing in a certain geographical area, but I'll talk about that at the end. So, okay, let's jump back to the presentation. If you do want to take a look at something, very happy to do that. Now let me do this. Let's go back to the presentation. Okay, you should be seeing, if somebody will just vocally go on, Utah Radon Map, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, I just want to make sure you're now seeing this. Okay, let's move on. So the Utah radon situation, again, it was a great question. How often are homes coming in? And it's 1/3 of homes. Now, Jeff, you've done enough testing with us. You might be able to agree to this. So it's radon is levels are different compared to time of year. So summer months, we are only testing about 17% high. And in winter months, 55% come back high. Have you ever noticed that, Jeff?
Yeah. So much so that we actually encourage our clients to reach out to you after they've closed on their home and do it in the opposite season from when they've bought.
Yeah. If they tested in the wintertime and it came in low, I'm not feeling too concerned about that. It probably is still low in the summer, but if it's summer months, we've seen some homes 3 or 4 times higher in the winter. And it's all about pressure. So if you have a hot house and cold air outside, that hot air is escaping through windows, cracks, other things. It's creating a negative suction pressure inside the house, which is actually sucking up on the soil gases, and you get more soil gases in the house. Summer months, the pressure inside the house and outside the house is about the same. So anyway, just be aware, if you do a test and somebody says, well, wait a second, I tested this before and it came back low and now you came back high, you can ask them, do you remember the time of year that you did it? So also if you're testing during really severe storms, now we're talking about winds are greater than 30 miles an hour, or it's a huge blizzard or something like that, that could affect the radon levels. But radon tests are very accurate. It's just a matter of, what were the conditions during the test? So as I said, some areas have very high radon, just plan on it being high. Western Daybreak, it's going to be high, even in the summer months. Alpine, Heber, those, just plan on them likely being high.
Hey, Bruno, why don't you speak to, and maybe you're going to bring it up later, but
yes,
a minute on testing a home that already has a mitigation system in it.
I'll bring that up in a second. So that's a good point.
Okay.
So average radon in the US is 1.3. This is super important that you think about this, 1.3. So when we say a home has a radon of 4, or even a radon of 3.9, it's 3 times over the average. So sometimes we get agents, oh, the test came back at 3.7, it's totally fine. It's still way elevated compared to the average. Now, we're going to talk about, what do all these numbers mean? I'll get to that. So, what are considered unsafe levels? The EPA has said this, with the average being 1.3, you should consider fixing homes starting at 2 picocuries. Remember, consider between 2 and 3.9. And once you get to 4, you should fix the homes that are above 4. The consider is based on usage and the situation. So if you have an unfinished basement, you're only storing things, you don't do anything down there, and you were to give me a call, say, hey, Bruno, I got a house, unfinished basement, it came back at 3.3 in the basement. I would say, do you spend any time down there? No. Are you planning on finishing the home? No. I'd say, you know what, don't worry about it. And because every level that you go up in a home, the radon is about half of what it was below. So if you have a basement of 10, you should be planning on the main level being between 5 and 6. The next level being between 2.5 and 3. So, 3.3, your main level is probably in the low to mid 1s. I wouldn't worry about it. So again, consider fixing between 2 and 4. That's why, 3.9 is not suddenly safe and 4.1 is suddenly going to kill you. The EPA, they were asked by the realtor associations, give us a number. We need a number to go off of. And they said, all right, we're going to go with 4. Now, the World Health Organization, they're actually more conservative. They said you should fix homes above 2.7. So what does this all mean to you? Because you're like, well, what do I do with my transactions? Well, the state, the Utah Radon Board, that's with the environmental portion of the state government, they have said we're going to just go off of the EPA recommendations. And so in Utah, we recommend that the standard should be if a home tests at 4 or above, it should be fixed. And you should consider between the 2 and 4 based on usage. So that's kind of the standard. We're going to get in at the end of this presentation more on transactions. We'll talk more about negotiations and what does this really mean. But so 4 is kind of the magic number. 3.9 though, it's high radon, but it then gets into the gray area. We'll talk about that. These were just if I didn't have internet connection when I was doing a live presentation. Okay, current Utah laws. So the EPA has left it up to individual states to come up with their laws. So there are some states where if you build a new house, you need to already put in radon resistant features. Or if you're doing a real estate transaction, you actually need to do a radon test during it. So there is one law on the books in Utah when it comes to radon. Does anybody know what that is? Just one. Any ideas? Well, here you go. If you have tested and it came in high and you have high radon, you must disclose. It's a disclosure law. So, if the owner knows that he has high radon, he has to disclose it. Now, if you have a radon mitigation system installed and it's been retested and it's low, then quite frankly, that radon mitigation system is a feature upgrade. It's not something to hide. It's, hey, look, this home is guaranteed to be safe. Let me give you an example. So I'm a boater, and I'm sure some of you guys are boaters too. The fact that my boat has a bilge pump in it to pump out the water out of the engine compartment, is that a downgrade? Is there a problem with the boat? No, my boat is, I know it's not going to sink if I get some water in there because my bilge pump's going to work. Exact same thing with the radon system. So now a bilge pump is out of sight, out of mind. A radon system can be super ugly if it's installed wrong, but I mean it's the same kind of a thing now. If a home has a working radon system, then you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so that's what we talked about there. Now let's talk about the testing portion of things. And we are right on time. We're quickly running through these things. So for a home to get tested, what we're doing is we're just following EPA guidelines. And if you want to geek out again, you can go to epa.gov/radon and read to your heart's content on radon. So what we first have to do during a real estate transaction is prepare the home for the test. And this is called closed house conditions. It's a pain in the butt, especially during the shoulder months of the year of the spring and the fall. People like to open up their windows. Well, unfortunately, we have to have closed house conditions 12 hours before we even start the test, and then also during the test. and the test lasts on average about 2 days or more. So you know what? If they're not willing to close all of the windows, we're talking even the top windows. So if people are trying to cheat and they open up their top window and they're like, the detector is not going to notice this. Actually, most of the time when you open up the top windows, it makes the radon higher because you get the air sucking out and pulling out of the basement and then out the window. So it's the worst thing you could do. Or they like put on a fan in the bathroom that's sucking out air out of the house. It's the worst thing to do. Your radon's going to be higher. So they think that they're cheating, but they're just A, going to go to hell, and B, they get a higher radon test. So it's kind of funny. So closed house conditions, windows closed, the entire test in all levels. The next thing is that it's totally fine for people to live in the house and be there during the test. They can come and they can go. They just can't prop outside doors open. So what that means is when you have people, workers in the house, or they're moving, it's just not a time to do the radon test. We need to wait until after if we have closed house conditions. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to mimic the same type of conditions as best as possible as during winter months. You're not opening up your window when it's 20 degrees outside. And so those are the conditions that we need to mimic. If you have a swamp cooler in the house and it's occupied and it's summertime, just don't plan on doing a radon test. It's impossible because they have to keep their windows closed, and swamp coolers can't be used during radon testing because you're sucking in a whole bunch of outside air and then forcing it down in. Impossible to get a good reading. So if it's vacant, yes, we can still do it. The swamp cooler has to be turned off. But if it's occupied, not possible to do. Central AC, totally fine to do. Normal heating furnace, totally fine as well. So that's important there. We've had some people that they, oh, do I have to go live in a hotel for 2 days? Absolutely not. And totally doesn't matter inside doors, open, close. I've had some agents, well, the door was closed to the room that the radon test was in. Doesn't make any difference. It's coming up from underneath, not inside. So minimum time to test the home, I said 2 days before, and the EPA says, 2 days, 48 hours, but because of scheduling of the radon testing companies, if they get there a little bit early and it ends up being 47.5 hours, is that a valid test? The answer is yes. So they say to look at a test, if it's over 46 hours, that's a valid test. If it's 4 days, if it's 7 days, is that going to be a problem? No, it's just more testing time because what we're doing is we're taking the average of the radon during the entire time. If you look at a radon test where there's hourly measurements, the radon is all over the place. You can have 1 hour, it's at 8 picocuries. The very next hour, it's at 1. And then it's back up to 6 and 4. It's fluctuating like crazy. Now, so what we're doing is we're taking the average. Actually, let's look at this bottom bullet point. So due diligence, Jeff was talking about that. We gotta deal with this due diligence. So average due diligence, and Jeff, jump on, help me with this. Usually it's 2 weeks. Are you seeing a lot of instances where it's now less than 2 weeks, or is it still usually about 2 weeks?
No, that used to be more common in this competitive market of multiple offers. That's one of the things that buyers are trying to be a little bit more aggressive on to appeal to the seller against other offers. So if one offer comes in with 2 weeks due diligence and yours is 7 to 10, you're just going to be moving about the transaction a little bit further. That's why we're seeing that, is just because of the competitive market we're in.
Okay, excellent. So for example, my company, if it aggressive 7 days. Well, if you call us on the day that you go under contract, yeah, we'll work it out that we can get it back to you before those 7 days. Because what we have to do is we have to contact the listing agent. We have to schedule the time for us to go. We have to set the tests. They have to be for 2 days. We have to collect the tests. The tests have to go back to the lab and be analyzed. And in our case, we are a accredited EPA lab here in Utah. So we don't have to send it out of state. And then we have to get you the results. So as much time as possible, it takes more than just going one time for a home inspector and look at it. There has to be multiple trips and everything. So plan that into your things. When you go under contract, now it's time to order the radon test. Who can perform the test? So we've had very helpful agents that say, "Oh, I'm very happy to set it for you." Well, Not possible. So the EPA says it needs to be an independent third party that's neutral to the transaction. So again, you have a licensed home inspector, licensed radon service provider. It cannot be any of the parties that's part of the transaction. So we must be setting the tests, collecting the tests, and we must be using approved equipment. So basically, if you get a report back from an inspector and it just has a number, the radon's 7.3, and there is no report or lab report or anything, they likely used what's a consumer radon test, and it doesn't produce a report, it just gives a number. Those are not approved for real estate transactions. So if you ever get a report from a home inspector, and there's some bad ones out there that are doing this, because like a certified radon test is $900 to $1,500 each unit, while something like this is $100. So they're kind of cutting corners, and they're not using approved calibrated equipment. So keep an eye on that. If you ever have a question, just call a radon company and say, hey, can I show you the report? Does this look legit? Okay, testing protocols. We're testing in the potentially lowest livable space. It's okay to do finished basements, but we're never testing in crawl spaces because nobody's ever going to spend any time down there. We're not trying to bust the house for the highest area where it has the highest radon. We're trying to measure in the potential lowest livable area what the radon is going to be. So that also means that we're not doing it in the mechanical room. Nobody spends time there. We're doing it in a family room. We're doing it in a bedroom, something like that, and not in like a closet. So if you find, here's an example where we would do a closet though. Small children, dogs, and they know that they're going to mess with the test, then we may hide it more so that way but a normal situation, the radon test is right out there in plain sight in normal livable area. It's not on the floor. It's usually on a chair, on a table. We bring in boxes so we don't have to put it on any of their stuff, especially if they're going to move. We're trying to keep it away from doors and windows, and we don't have vents blowing on it. Now, people can use fans in other parts of the house, just not in the room that we're testing. Okay, that was a lot, but this is now, we've got 10 minutes left, and we're right on time. Anybody have any questions on testing before we move on to now, what does it take to fix?
I have a question, Bruno.
You bet.
So as I understand it, with new construction, you can't test until the house is completed. So how do you handle the order for a free test on new construction when obviously they've been building it for 9 months and they they're past their due diligence, obviously.
Yeah, excellent point. With new construction, by the way, my company does over 2,000 installs of new homes a year. That doesn't include all the retrofits that we do. So we do a lot with new construction. And the reality is that you either need to install the system during the build and you don't know. It's just kind of, you're saying, hey, I've got a 1 in 3 chance that it's going to be high. Unless you're in daybreak, then you've got a really high chance. Or you just wait until the home is finished and then they do the test. Now, many builders though, all right, so builders are all over the place. For example, like Ivory, where they offer a radon system, what we're finding is they're usually about $1,000 more through the builder than if you were to just do it yourself. But it's during the construction. If you don't order through them, they actually make you sign a waiver that indemnifies them against any kind of high radon. Now, other builders, if you have tested within 6 months of building it and it comes in high, then they'll chip in $1,000 towards a radon system. So it's all over the board. So the short answer is put in a radon system during the build, or you're pretty much just acting like it's a retrofit after it's done if the builder has not has had you sign an indemnification. Does that kind of make sense? Hopefully it does. So
Yeah, it does.
all right. So fixing the home. So here's a home that has 2 different radon systems, an interior and an exterior. And the way you fix a high radon home is we're capturing the soil gases under the house, under the slab, before it even comes up into the lowest level, and then we're venting it out at roof level. So we do not want to be pulling house air. We want to be pulling air from the dirt itself. We can do this cost effectively, and the whole goal here is we need to get it to work, but we also want to hide it. Nobody has ever accused a radon system of being pretty. So, but we need to do it. So here's an example of an interior system. So we've been able to hide the pipes inside the home. We're doing it through chases. Sometimes you've got a pipe running up through a garage. I mean, most people don't care if there's a pipe, single pipe running from floor to ceiling in a garage. Sometimes we're in the back of a closet. We're just trying to hide it as best as possible. As we go up, the fan is in the attic, and then we just pop through the roof. Now, this is just so that way you can see it easily. Once we go with our white pipe, PVC pipe, up to the roof, our company, we transition to black ABS, so it's less visible. So all you would see is just a single pipe popping up through the roof. So pretty darn hidden system. Average cost in Utah is right around $1,400 for radon systems. There's only a few really radon companies in Utah, and all of us are typically bidding within $50 of each other. So there's really not this huge price difference. So about $1,400. And the good news is half a day to install. So that's super important. This is not some huge construction project. Exterior systems, this is where we have drilled in the basement and we're coming up with a pipe. And as soon as we get above ground level, we're now popping out. Usually it's the side of the home, maybe the rear of the home, definitely not the front of the home. The radon fan, it looks like a basketball sitting on a pipe. It's just sitting down there. You can see bushes could cover it. And then above that, we're doing one thing, either a PVC pipe, which is super ugly and industrial, or we use rain gutter downspout that looks much more natural. It just goes up and over the eave to vent. So the PVC is a little bit quieter. However, the downspout, what we've done is we put in a sound reducer above the fan. It's unique to our company. And so it makes our downspout actually even quieter than PVC. So we're just trying to make it, because I mean, you're moving a lot of air. There's going to be the sound of airflow. So we're just trying to reduce that as much as possible. So with the sound reducers, do people complain about the noise? And the answer is no. I mean, it's much quieter than, like, let's say a fan or a vent from a bathroom or the dryer. Again, exterior systems, right around that $1,400. Sometimes they're, a few dollars less than an interior system. And again, half a day to install, and they're just as effective. So, either one, we're pulling the suction under the slab. It just depends on where's the best place to hide it, inside and out. Crawl spaces, what we've done is we put a Class A vapor barrier. We're sealing. This is all glued to itself. Most crawl spaces just have visqueen that's just kind of thrown down, maybe stapled up against the thing, but it's not airtight. This is completely airtight. We're pulling a suction from underneath it, and you can see that the vapor barrier is being sucked down to the ground because of the suction. We've created an artificial barrier that is normally a slab would be, so we can suck the gas. Again, we don't want to suck the air in the crawl space, because that's would cause heating, air conditioning increases for the occupants. It's some crawl spaces are good, others are bad. Some have a lot of room, others don't. Ultimately, a crawl space is going to cost more than a regular just basement or slab on grade house. So typically it's about $2 per square foot to put the vapor barrier, then about $1,000 for the radon system. So 1,000-foot home crawl space would be right around about a $3,000 cost for installing a radon system. So just FYI. Good news is, I mean, with multiple people in a crew, we usually get it done still in a day. New construction, this just shows that we're able to hide the pipes in the walls before they've even done it. We've got piping all underneath the slab before they poured the slab. So we're able to pull a suction all throughout underneath the house. So very, very effective. And again, it's right there, right in that $1,400 to $1,500 range as just like a retrofit system. So even though we're having to come multiple times, It is less work for us. So it's about the same, even though we spend more time on it. Let me just put this last bullet point. Not enough Utah builders are offering this as an option. Again, you've got some, here's an example of, Sago Homes. So we install a radon system in every single one that they, townhome that they build. Exact opposite, and I can pick on him because I went to high school. He lived in my neighborhood. Perry Homes. Perry Homes, they, as I've talked to them, they just say, we're not worried about radon, and they really don't do much. So it's really frustrating. So you've got a whole bunch of different builders with different things. Some builders are doing a lot, others are not doing hardly anything at all, if anything. Radon in your deals. This is the last section, and we have just a few more minutes. So, all right, a house that you're buying, you're selling, it's tested high for radon. You're the agent. Dun dun dun. Oh no. Well, if you deal with it right, it's not going to be a problem. If you don't deal with it right, it could be a complete disaster. So, let's jump into this. Let's review again what these numbers are, thinking about your deals. If the radon test comes back between 2 and 3.9, again, that's in the gray area. The EPA says consider fixing. A lot of it depends, again, on usage. It also depends on how strong you are in your deal. If your buyer knows a lot about a radon, they're like, I am not going to live in a high radon home. You can push really hard on the seller to say, hey, my buyer, they're insisting to fix it, even if it's below 4. If, let's say, the sellers have already put in a new roof and they put in a new furnace, there's no money left. Especially if it comes in below 4, you may not have very much negotiating room. Now, if it's over 4, we are seeing that about 90% of the time, the sellers are just agreeing to pay to fix it. Our company is a little bit unique. We will actually do the work before closing and get paid through the title company at closing. So that way the sellers don't have to have any money come out of their pocket. Or sometimes they just do an allowance and then they do it afterwards, after closing. It just depends on the situation. But 90% of the time, the sellers are agreeing to fix it. About 5% of the time, the buyers are participating. Maybe they go halvesies in with it. And about 5% of the time, we find that the agents are then chipping in with their commission. And we hate to see this. You guys work really hard for your commission, and hate to see you then participating and paying for things that typically it's the seller responsible for. So yeah, we sometimes see it, but hopefully you don't have to do it. Typically it's the newer agents that are panicked. They're like, oh, I'll help pay for it. And it's like, you probably didn't have to. Remember, it takes less than a day to fix. The average right around $1,400 for a normal house. And the air quality in this home is going to be guaranteed to be better than the homes around it that don't have a radon system. Also, once you have done the testing or the fixing, the mitigation, you always want to test afterwards because we need to then make sure that we get it low. So most of the radon companies, Utah, will give a guarantee of 2.7 picocuries or less after an install. To put into perspective, over 80% of our installations, we're getting below 1. But sometimes you get a funky house that it's got a finished basement, and we might be in the 1s to the low 2s, but we're always guaranteeing that we'll get it low. So that's really important that you look for, is the radon company going to be giving a guarantee, and what's that level? So let's now jump back to the question that Jeff asked, and that is homes that already have a mitigation system. If it already has a mitigation system, should you do a test? And I used to say no, and then an agent did do a test, and it came back high, even with a running radon system. It was another company that installed it, and they didn't do a very good job. So is it smart to test even though it has a radon system? Because it has a radon system, it's shown that that house can have high radon. It's probably a smart thing to do to test it. Okay, key takeaways. This is the last slide, and that is all types of homes can have high radon. So slab on grade, seriously, doesn't have to have a basement. Crawl space, townhome, any of these can have walkout basement. They can have the same likelihood of high radon. Just depends on what's underneath them. 1/3 of homes have high levels. So if you have a customer that says, well, this home has high radon, I'm going to just look for another one. Your next home that you're going to test, it has a 1/3 in chance of having a high radon too. If you think about this, you guys are trying to keep your clients really cradle to grave in their home purchases. It's just not hopefully a one-off. So you get a buyer and you represent them, they buy a home and they don't test for radon. You didn't recommend it. And 5 years later, they're now selling the house and the buyers now come in, test for radon, comes in high. Your buyer, your seller in this case, is going to look back and you say, why didn't you recommend I test for radon when I bought this? Now I've got to pay for it, and I could have had the seller, when I initially bought this, pay for the system, and I've been living in high radon. What's going on? So the best is just, every time your buyer comes under contract, let's just get it tested for radon, because they will become sellers someday, and you also care about them and their health. Very fixable, should never mess up your deal. If you ever have a customer that's freaking out, or you've got another agent that hasn't taken a CE class, they don't know what's going on, very happy to get on a conference call and let's talk through it, because it really should not mess up your deal. So with all that said, what are the objections and the issues for, let's just test every single buyer that we get going forward. So that way we know it's not a problem. So will you start ordering radon tests for your buyers? And it doesn't have to be through us. It could be through your favorite home inspector. Just, we highly recommend you need to test, because again, it's not going to mess things up, and you're protecting them, the people that you care about. So with that in play, I've got one more screen that just talks a little bit about who we are. But to end this CE class, does anybody have any general questions?
Bruno, I got a couple of questions, and it has to do with the testing of a house that already has the mitigation system. That one that got done was actually my deal. And we didn't notice the mitigation on our first walkthrough on the property, so we ordered it right when we got under contract.
Yeah.
And then when we were there with the home inspector, it was pointed out to us. So it kind of happened by accident, but it's
Started late.
really glad that we did it, because that one actually came in above 20. I can't remember what it was, 22.
Yeah.
24. It was really high, and it had a mitigation system in there from another company. So my questions
I
are,
am not.
should they get
But I still didn't hear what you said.
mitigation system reevaluated or looked at to make sure it's still working properly down the road? And the other thing that kind of came up in that particular deal is the basement was over 3,000 square feet.
Yeah.
When talking to you and Russ, probably should have had 2 mitigation systems installed anyway because of the vast square footage.
Yeah, all right, so jumping into, let's go from backwards to forwards. So typically in a retrofit situation, one radon system can handle up to about 2,000 square foot basement. And then once you get above that, it depends on, is it gravel under the slab, other things, but you guys don't know that, it's a finished house. So it may work or it may not, it might need more. And so I guess the short answer is yeah, up to about 2,000 square feet, one system. Above that, maybe, maybe not. So that's one thing to consider. So if you are buying a house, you're the buyer's agent, it's a 3,000 square foot, and they say, yeah, we'll pay for one mitigation system. One might not be enough. So that's an example where you really push to, let's get one installed, retest, and if we need a second one, we can do the second one before closing, or at least they can do an allowance for more. Something to consider there. In terms of testing, yeah, we learned a lot on that one. We were pushing away people saying, it's already got a radon system, they can just test after the fact. Because the EPA says, it's always good to test every couple of years, whether you have one or not. That was a case where it's like, wow, yeah, we really do want to test. So something to consider. Let me just jump right into, because this will kind of also feed those questions of who we are and kind of what our policies are, because that's also talking about homes with mitigation. So if you look at Google, we have over 500, I think we're 550 something 5-star Google reviews. We're at perfect 5 stars, and I'm really proud of that because we go out of our way to really make sure people are happy. So it's something that you don't see very often, is that many reviews but still be perfect 5 stars. Our program is we test within 50 miles of Draper for free and for real estate transactions. if it's just a consumer and we're mailing them a test, we'll do the entire state. So basically 50 miles is North Ogden, all the way down to Santaquin, Grantsville, all the way to Heber, Park City. So we're happy to do that. And we have super keys, so we set and we collect. We're the ones that are going to be coordinating with the listing agent to get everything. As I mentioned, we have now 5 drivers. We're trying really hard. We're trying not to ask you to extend your due diligence. I mean, every once in a while, do we? I mean, especially in the springtime where it's crazy, yeah, we might say, you know, we need an extra day. But we're going to tell you up front, so we're very careful about that. Has to be within due diligence. We won't do it for free. If you ask us to do it outside of due diligence, we're going to charge you $150. With homes that already have a mitigation system, the likelihood is yes. I mean, it's not going to require anything. So we do charge $50. And quite frankly, that covers my cost of just setting and collecting the test. I'm not making money on that. I just got to cover my cost because I'm not going to get, I mean, it's going to be 1 in 1,000 that we get a mitigation out of that if it already has a system. So I think that that's fair. You can go onto our website, you can just call us, and it takes 5 minutes. I mean, we just ask very basic questions and then we take care of it from there. And, you know, most home inspectors charge, if you think about it, usually about $100 to do a radon test. Very, very fair, because they have to do the work, they have the equipment, and they don't have anything, they don't have any possibility of doing the mitigation. So you can tell your buyers, hey, you know what, let's get the home inspection, but I can save you $100 because I know of a radon company that'll do it for free. And so that makes you look good because you're like, hey, thanks, you're saving me money. So that's just a little bit about who we are. So I appreciate, you know, great attention. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. Jeff or anybody else, do you have any other questions? Or hopefully what you see from this is, wow, I really don't have an excuse to not order a radon test next time I come under contract.
I don't really have another question. I'll let anybody else that does chime in, but I just want to mention that make it part of your transaction checklist process. The day you go under contract triggers certain events, right? One of the very first things that should trigger is contacting Utah Radon and setting up that test. It's free. It's your clients. You're doing a disservice if you're not setting up a free test for your clients during due diligence, like Bruno says. And when you do it day one, even if you're being competitive on your due diligence timelines on your offer, they're going to get out there 99% of the time. And if worst case scenario, you get to the end and they just need another day to run that test, it's likely you're going to get that day extension and get that result back within your testing period. The other thing I want to mention is Jody's putting in the comments, those of you that haven't gone over to that Google Doc. I know Nathan, you're not in Utah, so I don't think Bruno can give you CE credit in Oregon. But those of you that are here on the class, if you want that CE credit, go and put your license number in on that form.
Yeah, and again, that link is right here on the bottom of this page, tinyurl.com/urs-ce.
And Jody's put it again in the chat box as well. You can just click on it.
Fantastic. Well, Jeff, again, thank you for the opportunity. We enjoy working with you guys. The merchant group is class act. We work with a lot of agents, and there's different qualities, and it's fun working with some real professionals like you guys.
Well, we appreciate you, and thank you for the time today, Bruno, and thank you all you guys for joining. I'm gonna sign off unless any of you have a last minute question.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. It was great.
All right, guys. Appreciate you, Bruno.
All right. Hey, have a great one, guys.
Thanks. Have a great day.
We'll see you guys.
Bye.